Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name's Adam Hanlon and I'm the editor of Wetpixel. And what I thought I'd like to discuss today is just some thoughts about diffusers, and namely these are the diffusers that we apply to strobes in order to achieve certain effects. So I've got a whole, you can't see them, but I've got a whole bunch of different diffusers down here. So I thought I'd introduce them. So first of all, this is a straightforward in-on diffuser from a Z240 strobe, one of the older models of in-on strobe. And as you can see, it's very much just a plastic disc that attaches to the front of the strobe and therefore has a number of effects on the light that the strobe is pushing out. And this is really what diffusers do, is they shape and they affect the way the light appears when it comes through, and that obviously affects the way the light impacts on your subject and affects the way that your image is going to turn out. So the first effect that a diffuser has is it will, most of them will to a greater or lesser extent increase the spread, i.e. the beam angle or the angle of light coming out the front of the strobe to some extent. Now there's a little bit of physics involved in this, in that generally with a flat port, i.e. a flat surface, we're producing a burst of light inside the strobe in air. It's then hitting, if assuming that the strobe has a flat front plate, and the maximum angle that you can achieve due to refraction is 96 degrees. So regardless of what you do, the maximum diffusion angle from the front of your strobe, assuming the front of the strobe is flat, is 96 degrees. So, for example, CNC, one of the manufacturers, produce a series of diffusers that you can attach to the front of their strobes. Now, without the diffusers on, the strobes put out predictably around about a 90-degree beam angle, but you can add one diffuser which will then increase that beam angle to 110 degrees, and you then can put a second diffuser on it, which I think then increases it out to 120 degrees. So by adding a diffuser, we can increase the beam angle. We can also do it by shaping the diffuser as well. So if, for example, we use a dome-shaped diffuser, that will help to increase the angle of spread. And the way it'll do it, obviously, is it will reflect the light, although it is less efficient than producing a dome on the front of the strobe itself. So here we have the in-on Z330, the newer model in-on, and as you can see, it has a dome-shaped front element which allows it to produce natively at 110 degrees. So as it stands, it's 110 degree beam angle. And again, we have a similar arrangement with the new C-Cam C-Flash 160. Again, dome shaped, much less pronounced perhaps than the one, but still a dome shape. And that helps to produce a wider beam angle natively. Using a dome diffuser, as I say, will achieve the same result. It again will spread the beam out and allow the beam to reach a wider angle. Now, at this point, we need to somewhat ask, why do we need to increase the beam angle? And there's a bit of a misconception. This is a helpful thing in limited visibility conditions or conditions where a backscatter, because in truth, what we need in those conditions is actually control over our lighting. We want to be very, very careful about where the lighting falls, so we don't illuminate all the stuff in the water that we don't want to light up. So in actual fact, in challenging conditions, what we really want is we want to reduce beam angles, to actually make beam angles tighter probably than we would normally. So when do we want to increase the beam angle? Well, typically we want to increase the beam angle when we have the visibility and the water conditions to try and light up big areas in our scene. So great big wide angle scenes. Think here the coral reefs in Raja Ampat or the Red Sea, or choose your favourite blue water coral reef destination. But certainly that's where we want this big beam spread when we've got challenging conditions, limited visibility. In actual fact, what we probably want to do is reduce the spread. So first thing it does is increases the angle that the light comes up in front of the strobe. The second thing it does is, diffusers do, sorry, is they tend to soften it. And certainly in-on have produced a specific diffuser, for example, for the Z330. Again, it reflects the dome shape of the front of it, which apparently doesn't increase the beam angle, but simply softens the light. It causes a reduction in the light output of about minus 0.3 stops, so minus less a third of a stop. But the idea is, again, it produces a softer, less harsh light. There are lots of other options along the same line. Again, we have, this is a CCAM diffuser from a C-Flash 150, and this is the same idea from the new 160, and that's one from a 60D. Oh, by the way, these have quite a neat little bayonet system on them now, so they just bayonet on the front, so which is a nice convenient way of doing it. Actually, as does the inner one also bayonets onto the front. So again, if we just do it like that, you can see it just literally just locks into the bayonet, locks in place. Nice and simple and easy to add and remove if need be during a dive. But so it does have a marked softening effect on the light. So it widens the light, it softens it, and certainly the dome diffuser, the aftermarket one, I know Clark Miller in the States make them, but there are lots of others, people making them. These are aftermarket diffusers, and they have the effect of distinctly softening, producing a softer light. But these are things that we want to use in situations where we have plenty of good visibility. There's not a whole lot of particles, where we don't need to control where the light falls, but we want an overall soft effect to the lighting, let the lighting wrap around it. Okay, third effect it has is it has an effect on the color of the light that the strobe puts out. Now, without wanting to get too heavily involved with strobe construction, but smaller strobes by definition tend to produce a cooler light temperature, and think of a bluer light temperature, and bigger strobes tend to produce, and these are all generalizations, tend to produce a warmer, so think a more orangey light. And typically when we're shooting in blue water conditions, that more, in fact arguably in green water too, that more orangey, warmer light tends to be a little bit more pleasing and easier to get a nice color balance in the water. So returning to our Inon Z330, this has a native color temperature, I think 5,500, 5,600 degrees Kelvin. So what Inon have come up with is they've come up with a colored diffuser which corrects that light output. It does produce a reduction in the output to 4,600 degrees Kelvin. So we have a reduction or a change in the color temperature, which allows us to produce a more pleasing blue or green color, depending on what color water we're shooting in. The big CCAM strobes with the circular flash tubes, and in fact even the smaller CCAM tube, the strobe, the 60D, this one has a circular flash tube, and by typically circular flash tubes are slower. That makes sense, I think, because the photons have to travel further around the speed of light. So, but they produce a slow, and that tends to be a warmer color. So their native color, I think, is around about 4,800 degrees K, something like that. So by definition, so they probably don't need modifying as much. An old tip in the old days, and before we could buy products that allowed us to modify it, is you can add a piece of photographic gel on the inside of a standard diffuser. And one that worked very well in blue water was a Lee gel. It was a straw filter, and I think its Lee number was 44444, and you added a circle, cut out circle of 444 gel on the inside of these diffusers, and that did a really good job of modifying the color temperature to make it more pleasing, particularly in blue water. So there are things you can do even with a standard diffuser. If there isn't the option of buying a specific color temperature diffuser for the strobe that you have, you can actually improvise by adding gels behind the diffuser. You'll be careful when you take the diffusers off, of course, because they float away if it's underwater, which is not good for the diffuser or the environment. So please be careful doing that. All right, so we've got the beam spread, we've got the fact that it softens the beam, we've got the improvements in color temperature, and then we've got a fairly unique tool, which is this one here, which is actually a -4 EV diffuser. Why would we use this? Well, if we're shooting, for example, in situations where we're using depth of field as a creative tool, where we're opening the field opening the aperture right up in order to maximize a shallow depth of field because we've got a background that's not pleasing, for example, what we may find is that the strobes themselves, even at their lowest setting, still remain too powerful. So what we can do is we can add a diffuser to it, which helps to reduce that light output from the strobe. Now, the other option, of course, would be to pull the strobes back away from the subject. The problem, if we do that, then we run the risk of then increasing the amount of light in the water, and again, it becomes harder to control. So, in general, we can reduce the amount of light using diffusers. We can also reduce its spread, and these are reduction rings. I think CCAM call them macro protection rings, but they're available for other strobes as well. And again, these simply bayonet onto the front of the strobes, like so. There we are. And they, as you can see quite obviously, they reduce the beam angle. And these are a very, very useful tool in limited visibility. So going back to what we were saying about using diffusers in challenging visibility conditions, these are actually a much more useful tool because they stop that light spraying all over the place and make it much easier to control where the light's falling, rather than it just landing on the all over the place and lighting all the stuff up in the water. So we can use specific tools to reduce the output of the strobe. Now, it's important to stress that any diffuser will reduce the output of the strobe somewhat, but obviously some specific ones can either reduce the beam angle or can reduce the actual output from the strobe. So that was a bit of a crash course on diffusers. I hope the information will help you decide whether you're going to use a diffuser in a particular circumstance or not, and you understand a little bit more about what diffusers are and how they work. I'd like to thank Critters at Lembit for the sponsorship of this episode. Please feel free to add comments in the section below. If you add suggestions for what you'd like to see in the future, we'll try and make some more films about those. And obviously remember to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next time.